Do it. You do it, Daddy.
Do you not want to tell people what the story is?
Mr. Muddle.
Mr. Muddle. It's one of our favourites, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, come here then.
Mm-hmm.
On this particular day, Mr. Muddle was in a very good mood. Little Miss Scatterbrain had invited him to go fishing by the sea.
Good.
Is that good?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What?
Look.
What's happened?
No wet. And dirt.
Ah, so there's water all over Mr. Muddle's floor because he hasn't turned the tap off. That is not over his sink.
No.
And he's got his boots up there.
Yeah.
That's strange, isn't it? We don't do that, do we?
No.
No. Now, before he left, he sat down at his table and he tried to write a list of all the things he would need. Now, I'm sure you're surprised to hear that Mr. Muddle wrote a list, because I was. Perhaps Mr. Muddle had decided that he'd had enough of making a terribly muddle of everything. As he set out to buy the things that he needed for a day's fishing, he began to sing a favourite song. What's happened?
His roof is upside down.
His roof's upside down. Mr. Muddle has his roof upside down.
Oh.
Well, that's just ridiculous, isn't it, Henry?
Yeah, but what about like my car?
Yeah.
Like books like this?
Like books like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, everything would get wet if it rained, wouldn't it?
Like this?
We're going to read that one in a moment.
Like this? The
Yeah.
books like this are you read?
Yeah.
Like Mr.
But
Muddle.
Mr. Muddle is silly, isn't he, Mr. Muddle?
Yeah.
So Mr. Muddle began to sing a favourite song. Five little fish went up what? Went up the hill to fetch a pail of water? No. To buy a currant bun with sugar on top, perhaps? No. Oh dear. It doesn't seem as though Mr. Muddle has stopped making a terribly muddle of everything, does it? So Mr. Muddle went to the fishmonger's. Good morning, he said. I'd like some worms for my fishing rod. The fishmonger looked, well, very confused indeed. So Mr. Muddle went to catch the bus. When the bus arrived, instead of getting onto it, Mr. Muddle asked for a cheese and jam sandwich. And strawberries with ketchup, please, he added. How very muddled. Would you like that sandwich?
Yeah.
Cheese and jam sandwich.
Yeah. Cheese, no.
Oh, you don't like cheese, do you? What about strawberries?
No.
Yeah, strawberry sandwich. Yeah, you'd be okay with that. Finally, Mr. Muddle arrived at the seaside. I think I was going to meet somebody here, but I just can't be sure who. What a terrible muddle, said Mr. Muddle to himself. And he thought as hard as he could, but he just couldn't remember who he was meant to be meeting. His thinking was interrupted by little Miss Splendid walking past. Am I not looking magnificent today, Mr. Muddle? Little Miss Splendid asked, not very modestly. Yes, absolutely magnificent, I do believe. Oh, no, I mean, yes, said Mr. Muddle in a terrible muddle. Were you looking for me by any chance? Not at all. I was perfecting my suntan, said Little Miss Splendid. But I have a marvellous idea. Let's go ice skating. There's a competition today and I'm sure to be splendid and win everything. Oh. Well, it wasn't long before Mr. Muddle found himself wearing ice skates and stepping out onto the ice. Help me, Little Miss Splendid, cried poor little Mr. Muddle, desperately grabbing onto his fishing rod. There's something not quite right about this floor, it's terribly slippery. But Little Miss Splendid just glided away elegantly. What's wrong with the floor?
Too slippery.
Too slippery? Ice is very slippy, isn't it? But then, all of a sudden, Little Miss Splendid turned and headed straight towards Mr. Muddle. She scooped him up and twisted and twirled him high in the air. She spun him around and around, faster and faster, until he didn't know his up from his down and his right from his wrong. Left. Well, in any case, he was terribly muddled. But the judges, well, they thought it was a triumph, and they gave him the highest scores. What scores did they give him, Henry? What numbers?
9.
They've all given him 9. Wow, that's really high, isn't it?
What about this?
Yeah, that book's broken, isn't it? And now for the next 2 contestants, announced the commentator. Mr. Wrong and Little Miss Scatterbrain. What a pair! Mr. Wrong and Little Miss Scatterbrain. So Mr. Muddle, Little Miss Splendid, Mr. Wrong and Little Miss Scatterbrain were all as silly as each other. So together they began the silliest ice dance ever seen. The audience loved it. And encouraged by the crowds, the skaters threw themselves into a final riot of twists and turns. Little Miss Splendid ended the routine splendidly, flying through the air, holding on to Mr. Muddle's fishing rod. What a catch! The crowd clapped and cheered until they could clap and cheer no more. And who do you think won the ice skating competition?
Dad,
Who is it?
Mr. Muddle.
It was the 4 friends, of course, yeah. We've won the fishing competition, cried Mr. Muddle as he was handed the cup. He still thinks he's fishing.
Yeah.
Silly Mr. Muddle. So Mr. Muddle was so happy that he went to bed that night and he took his cup with him.
Ah.
He also slept in his ice skates, because then if little Miss Scatterbrain invited him fishing again, he'd be sure to be ready. Do you sleep in ice skates?
Oh, I don't.
No.
That'll be too ouchy.
It would be, wouldn't it? Too ouchy. So the next morning, the telephone rang, and it was little Miss Scatterbrain. Do you think she invited Mr. Muddle fishing? Did she?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Well, no. She invited him to go skydiving. Or skydiving?
A skydiving? That's not right.
That's not right, is it? Or maybe driving.
Driving? That's not right either.
Or dribbling.
No, that's not right either.
Oh dear. What a muddle.